If today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts. The refrain from our psalm today really helps us to understand the lens in which to look at today's gospel. If today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts. I don't know about you, but for me growing up, when I heard that phrase to harden one's heart, I always took pity on Pharaoh. Pharaoh in the book of Exodus, where he always has this heart hardened towards the Lord. I always thought, if God is love, how can he harden our hearts? And then I was listening to Catholic radio a few years ago, and it finally made sense. Go figure. On Catholic radio, it was talking about the fact that if you take a stick of butter and put it out on the sidewalk, it will melt under the sun, right? Well, if we take a piece of clay under that same sun, what's going to happen to it? It's not going to melt, it's going to harden. So the Lord does not look at us differently, does not treat us differently, but the makeup of our hearts then shows us how we will respond to the Lord. So if today you hear his voice, may your hearts be made of butter and not of clay. Basically, is what the Lord is saying. Now, for many of us that go out to breakfast this afternoon, I'm not talking about the butter and cream that we're going to put on our biscuits and that we're going to put on everything, because we've got plenty of that and plenty of that fat in our bodies as it is. So maybe all of our hearts are made of butter. We'll just all die of heart attacks. I don't know. But that's not what the Lord's talking about today. When we see in today's gospel Jesus coming to meet this Samaritan woman at the well, it's a very off-putting story to any Jews hearing this gospel, to any Jews hearing this story and this parable. Because the Samaritans and Jews were more than just enemies. They had blood feuds towards each other. They hated each other. So that when Jesus says, "Get me something to drink," we share nothing with you. It'd be like asking someone in COVID times, "Hey, can I have a drink of your water?" No! Do you want to get COVID? We had those fears within us. But it's not out of that fear of getting them sick, because ironically, they would have given them a drink if it would have gotten them sick. But in today's gospel, when Jesus, a Jew, goes to this Samaritan woman, she's terrified. Did you notice what time of day it was when Jesus went to meet at the well? It was noontime. I don't know about you, but if you've ever been to Phoenix, Arizona, in the middle of summer, it's like 119 degrees at noon. Oh, but it's a dry heat, Father. It's 119 degrees. I don't care if it's dry or not. It's hot. And the reality is, that's pretty much the conditions that this woman was going to the well during. Carrying this big pot of water that they'd put on their heads and walk to and from the wells to then be able to bathe and clean and drink and stay hydrated in. She goes out at the hottest part of the day, and you may sit there and say, what was she thinking? Or more likely we would say, because we're from the South, oh, bless your heart. But the reality is she went out at that time because of the question that Christ asks her. He says to her, "Go get your husband." "Well, I don't have a husband." "You're right in saying that. You've already had 5. And the one that you are with is not your husband." She went to the well by herself at noontime because at that time for a woman to be divorced, the punishment was stoning to death. And if one of your enemies, the Jews, then comes and sees you and knows that you have been divorced, biggest enemy, has nothing to lose, just me in this well, I'm up a creek without a paddle. Had to have been what was going through her mind. She had to have been terrified. But the Lord, as he always does when he comes to meet us, tries not to make her afraid, but tries to meet her where she is. He wants to accompany her the same way that he accompanies the disciples on the road to Emmaus. He wants to challenge her, let her know that he knows who she is and what she's done. But notice there's no accusation in today's gospel. He never says, "You are a horrible person." He says, "No, I give living water. I know who you are and I still love you." And that is at the heart of today's gospel. that Christ calls us to love everyone, even those that societally we see as enemies. The problem, though, is we really struggle with that today. But it's not a new problem. We've always struggled to love our enemies, and in this dialogue here, we see even the back and forth in Jesus' time is the same as ours. But Christ is calling us to do more, to be more. Because by our baptisms and by his passion, death, and his resurrection, he has lifted us from the burden of sin. But due to concupiscence, that calling back from sin, many times we choose to sin over the love of God. If I were to ask you, this is a participation part of the homily, if I were to ask you, how many of you want to live in a world of peace? How many would you raise your hands? Those that are paying attention are raising their hands. If I were to ask you, who wants to live in a world where you have happiness? Raise your hands. Again, those that are paying attention are raising their hands. If I were to ask you, who wants to live a life full of joy? Raise your hands. Okay? If I were to ask you, who wants to be hated? Raise your hands. One? Or was he stretching? I couldn't quite tell. Okay. One. He wants to be hated. Well, that's the life that Christ lived. Not only hated. But the reality is, the life that Christ lived was a life that he didn't care whether he was loved or hated, because he loved despite the response. And for you and for me, many times when we're given rules, we're like that teenager that says, yeah, I don't like rules. Why are you trying to hold me down? Like if we give you a curfew and say, your curfew is at 10 o'clock. So you do it the first time, right? And the next time the curfew's still 10 o'clock. You come scuttling in at 10:05. Curfew's still 10 o'clock. Didn't get in trouble last time. 10:15. Curfew's still 10 o'clock. They didn't say anything when I was 5 minutes late or 15 minutes late. 10:45. What did you do? Where have you been? Ow, yeah. That's normally our response, like, oh man, okay, that's the line. But the reality is God gives us rules and regulations not to limit us, but because he wants us to be filled with joy. I don't know about you, but for me, growing up, when I heard the 10 Commandments, I saw them as restrictions. You cannot, you must not, you must not, you must, right? The reality is, he says, no. Do you want to live a life of happiness, a life of peace? Yes, do these. Don't do these. But even just a little bit, none of it. I know this speed limit says 60, but are they really going to put me over for 63? Out here they will. It's happened. Been there, done that. We push that, we find out 63 is the line. Go 62, and then 61, and then actually follow the speed limit. But we have to learn and grow into that, don't we? But when our hearts are hardened towards the Lord, it's hard for us to see that everything that he gives to us is for our betterment. Even the tough times. Why? Because if our hearts aren't hardened, our heads definitely are sometimes. Because things go in one ear and out the other. Well, the challenge is to go like this. So get stuck in there and then wiggle it around a little bit. And chew on it. Because everything that the Lord offers to us will give us a life of peace, a life of joy, and a life of happiness. Notice what I didn't say there. I didn't say it would be easy. I didn't say it wouldn't be cumbersome. I didn't say it wouldn't be burdensome. I didn't say it wouldn't be difficult. But everything the Lord gives us the opportunity to be in peace, joy, and happiness. Even the difficult parts. But sometimes we struggle in those difficult parts because we tend to have this center of the universe mentality, as like the world revolves around me, and things bad happening to others, oh well, I'm sorry for that, and I can sympathize with that, but until you've put your shoes in someone else's shoes, this is why I write things down, until you put your foot in someone else's shoes, you really can't empathize with them, right? I grew up in Moore, Oklahoma, And 1999, May 3rd tornado took out the majority of Moore, Oklahoma. I got off for a week of school. I was so happy. I didn't think about the tragedy that had happened. I thought, oh great, this is an opportunity for me to go to my parish and to volunteer, to go out and give. And I had seen the piles of rubble. That's what it was. It looked like a war zone through Moore, Oklahoma. And I thought, I feel so bad for these people. On to high school. It was just a moment in my life. And then May 8th, 2003, we had another tornado go through Moore, a little smaller this time. And I thought, man, I feel so bad for those people. My brother's car got destroyed. My mom's school got hit. But nobody died. I had to go and take 2 days to clean up and back to school. And it wasn't until May 20th of 2013 that I finally was able to put my feet in the shoes of those people that I had ministered to in the past. Because that one took our house. That one took my school. That one took the children of some of my classmates at Plaza Towers. And I finally understood what God was telling us through the person of Jesus Christ when he says to love your enemies, when he says to love God, when he says to love your neighbor. Because my neighbors to the left had a pile of rubble. My neighbors to the right, their whole upstairs was gone. By the grace of God, we only lost about 25% of our stuff, and sometimes I wish we had lost a little bit more because my dad loves his tchotchkes. And he said, well, when I die, you'll have to deal with them. Mom's stuck with them now. But the reality is, many times we struggle to see the plight of the other because we can't truly understand what they're going through. We hear about horrible things happening in the world today, and they may hit us a little bit in the heart, but until they impact our immediate circle, it's just another, I'm sorry, and moving on. And we don't think about it normally in those terms. But do we realize that there is still persecution of Christians going on in the world today? I kind of knew it until I became the pastor of Corpus Christi, where half of our community were first-generation refugees from Myanmar. And I had never heard much of Myanmar except for its part of Siam because I played the game Risk. That's the only reason that I knew where it was even. Mandalay Bay was there. Hey, they've got a casino in Vegas. It's about all I knew until I got to meet the people. And I realized that the 3% of the country that's Christian are persecuted by the 90% of the country that are Buddhist. It's like, wait a second, Buddhists, they're all monks, right? They're all peace and love and, right? Well, not all of them. Just like not all Christians are peaceful and loving. I was talking in the confirmation class about this a couple weeks ago, and I said one of the hardest things for me to hear as a chaplain at a Catholic high school is that someone doesn't want to be a Christian because Christians are all a bunch of hypocrites. Ouch. That's a call to task. It's a call for us to see, how am I living out the gospel? Are my words matching my actions? Or am I like the Pharisees and do what I say, not what I do? And how many times have we had those discussions and fights with our parents? Do this. Why? Because I said so. Why did you say so? Because. Why because? Because I'm in charge. How many people look at the Catholic Church that same way? Well, the Pope is just a dictator that tells us what we have to do. Well, Christ wouldn't really do this. What is it that we're really about? Look at the message. The message hasn't changed in 2,000 years. The message is God is love. As his sons and daughters created in his image and likeness, we are created out of his love, to embrace his love, to live it out, and ultimately to return to it. That, my brothers and sisters, is the meaning of life. Oh, but God has this will set out for me. Yes, he does. But it's not as specific as we think it is. Well, will God bless my life if I follow this path or this path? Can you embrace God's love going to this path or this path? Yes. Then yes, he will, no matter which choice you choose. But if the question is, will God bless my life here though I'm turning to sin? And will God bless my life here though I am seeking virtue? He's probably going to bless more the virtuous life lived, right? But when it comes to a specific profession, God loves us all. We need people of every profession. If it comes to which college we go to, God is no fan of any specific college. Boomer sooner. And there's all those jokes that we make about when Mike Gundy gets to heaven, he gets this itty-bitty cottage, and when Bob Stoops gets to heaven, he gets this mansion. Well, he won more. That's not God. That's us imagining God in our image, not us in his. Fun jokes to tell, but how much truth do we put into them? But in today's gospel, my brothers and sisters, he's trying to take all the memes out and get to the heart of what truly matters. And the heart is, no matter how sinful you've been, no matter how many bad mistakes you have or will make, no matter what country you come from, what language you speak, what customs you hold, God never stops loving. God will never stop loving you. Though we try many times, God never turns his back on us. When we choose sin, God, like that image in the back of the church of the risen Christ, is always there. When I'm facing to him, I've gone to the sacrament of reconciliation. I've received his body, blood, soul, and divinity at the altar. When I sin, I slowly turn my face away from Christ. And the more I turn my face away from Christ, the harder it is to see him, even in the reflections of the mirrors here. The harder it is to hear him because I'm not speaking into the megaphone or hearing from him. And when we turn our backs on the Lord, he has the same response as when we are face to face. Come to me, all you who are labored and are burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon your shoulders, for I am meek and humble of heart, and I do truly love you. No matter what you do, turn back to me. Don't allow your hearts to be hardened against me. And if they are, come back to my heart. Come back to the heart that was pierced by a lance. Let him love you. Let him forgive you. And then we can begin to forgive ourselves. And as we begin to forgive ourselves, we can see what the message of God is. And that message, my brothers and sisters, is love. Love your enemy. Love your neighbor. Love yourself. Not because they deserve it, not because you deserve it, but because God ultimately wills it.